I just would ask if we have any conflicts of interest.
Yes, I failed to declare yesterday Sport Hawke's Bay, but they are today, so declaring that conflict.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Welcome to our submitters for our first session. Just to let you know, you have 10 minutes to do your presentation. That includes questions from councillors. There'll be a bell at 5 minutes to let you know you're halfway through, and a double bell at 10 minutes. So welcome to all of you. And our first submitter today, Paul Bailey, is joining us by Zoom. Welcome, Paul.
Kia ora, Your Worship. Thank you very much for that introduction. I really appreciate that. Sorry I'm not there in person, working down in Wellington this week. Look, I just wanted to say a couple of positive things. Your Worship, I really appreciated your introduction to the long-term plan consultation document. I think it demonstrates that the Council has a lot of courage in tackling the big issues that are confronting the Napier community, especially around water, which I'm conscious that it'd be nice if we all had Harry Potter wands and could magic it all away overnight, but we can't. And I think the long-term plan demonstrates how serious you are as a council in dealing with that issue, which is really pleasant to see. I also appreciate that you're beginning to take climate change issues seriously, and that again, that's demonstrated not only in your introduction, Kirsten, but throughout the document. So that was really pleasant to see. I would say the water one's going to be interesting, and I appreciate the challenges that staff would have had trying to put a long-term plan together, knowing what was coming from central government. So congratulations to the staff for doing that. And I think they've handled that really well. And I look forward to the discussion in the future about where we're going to go with Three Waters. So that's all the sort of really cool stuff I'd like to say about the long-term plan. But I would just like to, I have a concern with regard to the Napier Library Civic Precinct comments made on page 24. This is with respect to obviously replacing the Civic Precinct framework document that you put out, which was a really good read, and I'm comfortable with the direction you're looking at going and the work that's been done on that, especially for Councillor Brosnan. I think her name was all over that. But like I say, on page 24 in the Napier Library Civic Precinct comments, it says that we have set aside 55 million for the whole development. I wasn't sure whether that 55 million had already been approved through some other consultation, or that's been expected to be signed off through this long-term plan document. So it'd be helpful if staff in responding to the submissions and verbal submissions when they bring that paper to you with regards to decisions around the long-term plan, if they could clarify when exactly that 55 million was set aside, whether it was done previously or whether it's being done now. I'd appreciate that comment from staff when they come around to do that. Only needs to be a couple of lines, but I think that would clear that up. And that's the end of my submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. I will open up for any questions from councillors. No, and I guess just to expand a little on the Civic Precinct, there certainly will be a significant amount of further consultation undertaken. So at the moment, it's really just a tag in the long-term plan that's the funding that's available at the moment, but there will certainly be much more consultation undertaken as we work through that planning process.
Yeah, cool. Look forward to it, Kirsten. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, all right.
Excellent. I'll now invite Phil Norman, and our submitters are speaking from the front of the room up here. Thank you. Welcome, Phil.
Good morning. I hope I'm in the right place this time to make my submission. It's concerning the use of the cycleways combined with the walkways, which as I say in my submission, both my wife and I are frequent users, both walking and myself on a bicycle. And we've been concerned for quite some time that there's a potential for a serious accident to happen on the cycleways because of inconsiderate behaviour from cyclists, both old and young. And this came to fruition last year with our 80-year-old neighbour who was passed at great speed, very, very close. She felt the cyclist go past her, which caused her to fall on the cycleway, broke her arm, and she was out of action. She lives on her own, so we looked after her for 6 weeks. And we think it's time for some control to be put on the combined cycleway walkway. We control traffic on roads and everywhere else. It's time, I feel, before somebody gets even more seriously injured through inconsiderate use of bicycles on the cycleways. And I would like council to introduce some rules for you. It's a privilege to be able to go on the cycleways. They're magnificent. I use them often on my bike. I'm a geriatric electric biker. Really appreciate the opportunity to be able to get round and really enjoy Hawke's Bay. But both of us feel, and others I've spoken to feel, that it's time that some control was put on the use of bikes on the cycleways. And that's my submission. One night.
Thank you very much, Phil. Are there any questions from councillors? Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Morena, Phil. Thank you very much for your submission. I suppose I'm interested in your view. Regulation of the space is obviously one tool council has, and with that would come, for instance, the need to be able to enforce whatever regulation was put in place. So your view on that versus, say, some education to start out with? We've looked at that, and I think it's hard to control, hard to regulate, hard to govern on the cycleways. But I think if a set of rules were brought out throughout the Hawke's Bay, so people became aware of what the expectation was for behaviour on the cycleway, that would go a long way. Have great doubts whether education would have any. You see people go flying past you at a great speed. You don't hear them coming, and you see that they've got a bell on their bike. It's just a simple matter of making people aware that they're not alone on the cycleway. That it's a joint. It's for everybody to enjoy, not just speeding cyclists. And they're great. They're fabulous. It's probably the best place in the world actually for cycleways. It's absolutely brilliant, but it is becoming even more and more precarious every day. We go out just about every day. As I say, I ride. Pam walks. I walk with her quite often, and I'm horrified at the total ignorance of some people who just you can feel them brushing past you. They're that close. And they're going, most cyclists, particularly on an electric bike, you can quite easily attain 20 kilometres an hour. Even on a push bike, I used to do anywhere between 20 k's on my bike before I changed to electric. And if you get hit at that speed on the cycleway, as was proved by my neighbour, you can do serious injury. So I think a set of regulations to bring to people's attention what the expectations are for behaviour on the cycleways would go a long way to help.
Councillor Bogue.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about where the accident happened. And what do you think are the most dangerous areas? Is it the shared cycleway, like along the parade? Is it the rural ones? Is it people riding on footpaths? What are the areas?
I think I cycle primarily around the water ride, and then out to the airport, out to Bayview. Then I come back and I go along the waterfront, and come back through from the end of there towards Clyde. I think everywhere you go, unless you get onto the really rugged stuff like going up to Puketapu, where you don't see many walkers, on the sealed cycleways is the main area of danger of accidents happening.
It's so easy to go fast there too, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Through you, Madam Chair. Morning, Phil.
Nudge.
I have experienced some of what you discussed. When you're walking, you don't hear them coming until the last minute, and then suddenly there's a cyclist right on your shoulder. Maybe rather than regulation, because I hate people that put rules in that are unenforceable. But maybe what we need is something, not quite an education campaign, but maybe it's a courtesy code of conduct that we could promulgate, which is basically education. But it's about, but it is about a code of conduct, isn't it? Because what we're saying is we want people to behave in a certain way when they're using these shared environments, because it does scare the kajeebas out of you sometimes, the pace that they're moving, and you think, another couple of inches, if I had have simply stepped to the right, I would have been cleaned out by someone doing 40 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
And you think, actually, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And then you think, why is it that some people just have no spatial awareness about how to operate around other moving people? And that's where I think your concerns are very valid. And I think maybe there is an opportunity for us to work somewhere along the lines of a code of conduct, more or less, for the users.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much for
Okay.
your time today, Phil.
Thank you, Ray.
Councillors.
No?
That's swinging.
Wait until it's electric.
And next I'd like to invite Alan White from Bike Hawke's Bay, please. Welcome, Alan.
I'm not great on technology.
Spacebar.
So it's just... Okay. I think I understand what you mean. Are we on? Well, thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors, for giving me the opportunity to speak to the Bike Hawke's Bay submission. Having to follow on from Phil, it's quite a task. I've got some ground to make up, I think, but I can certainly relate to everything he says. I see with the advent of electric bikes, the careless use of fast, powerful bikes on cycleways or shared pathways. But I'm not here to talk specifically on that, but I would urge council, if they look at that, to talk to cyclists and talk to walkers in the same room, because we're in this together. You can't talk to pedestrians, electric bike people, normal bike people. We've got to be in the same room. So with that aside, I'll start my submission. Bike Hawke's Bay's submission is 537, and that elicited just 4 lines of comment from management. My personal submission, 680, which I stated I would not speak to, seems to have been responded to in greater depth and refers to much of the Bike Hawke's Bay submission in content detail. So I've taken the liberty to combine the council management comments in the Bike Hawke's Bay issues today. So who are we? Bike Hawke's Bay is the former Hawke's Bay Cycle Aware group, and we seek to be a voice for people who ride bikes. Our vision is for biking to be safe, comfortable and convenient as a mode of transport for all people of all ages and abilities, and we advocate for improvements that will achieve this vision. I'll briefly talk about what our submission said. And if I press the right button, no, I pressed the wrong button, spacebar. Right, thank you. So, we said in our submission, over the 10-year life of the LTP, Council proposes to spend a greater amount of money on car parking than it does on active transport. The identified $473,000 investment for new cycle and walking tracks over 10 years of the long-term plan is surprising when emissions reduction should be at the forefront of all councillors' minds. The plan is totally silent on any mention of infrastructure that will make active transport safer and a more attractive choice. Think about it. 47% of CO2 emissions come from transport, and drivers are not being put on notice. The plan is lacking in any put on notice. The plan is lacking the plan is totally lacking in addressing any of the reductions in emissions from vehicles that will be required in terms of the plan. The need for clear definition between cycleways, meaning active transport on-road, commuter and village linkages, is not there, and recreational pathways, there needs to be that definition between two. My apologies. And this, bit of a mess. And there's certainly been a lack of significant active transport infrastructure of a commute type in Napier's roads over the last 5 years. And against that, we've got before I get on to this next slide, I will acknowledge, and I think what Mr. Bailey said is quite true. The council is under severe pressure with the three waters. I think the council have done well to listen to the community and address that. And our submission is about refocusing transport monies and transport space. But it doesn't mean that the council cannot avoid dealing with the Climate Change Commission's report and this issue of the global warming to 1.5 degrees over the next, in terms of cuts of greenhouse gases between now and 2030. I feel the plan, by not alerting the community to the issues and the urgency of the task, is compounding the scale of change that will ultimately be required before 2030. So in terms of the council's management response, the management response refers to a transportation strategy which will incorporate climate change and will focus on how to provide multimodal city which will address the same issues that Bike Hawke's Bay has raised. And we welcome this. We only became aware of the existence of this document last month. We do look forward to a time when the council sees benefit in the sharing of thoughts and engagement with cyclists in a pre-consultation phase. If they had done that, they would have benefited from the feedback from network users' experiences as part of the early stages of the planning process. And if they talked to the cyclists and the pedestrians together, you would have actually got the total problems that everyone has experienced, the walkers as well as the cyclists, as Mr. Norman mentioned. It's not just us. And I suppose I would ask the question, how do we as a cycle group, which speaks for people who cycle most days of the week, not come within the City Council's definition of a stakeholder? The management in their comments also state that at a strategic level, the city's vision principles have pedal power, and it suggests this seeks to promote a multimodal transport initiative across the city. This was new. I knew about pedal power, but I would ask that they share with us the multimodal transport initiatives that have been implemented under this broad principle over recent years, say 4 years. How the success of these multimodal projects have been measured, and whether the community was involved in any consultation before them. With due respects, and we may have missed something, but we haven't been heard, or we haven't been asked, and it does sound a bit like planning speak. Having said that, I do think the staff are given a hell of a job to make comment on such a large number of submissions in a very compressed period of time. The management also do state that almost all of the council's improvement projects incorporate measures to improve walking and cycling. And in addition, the LATMs will cover cycling and walking improvements. And we certainly supported that investment in those plans. But without an active transport strategy, without a cycle strategy, and without knowing exactly what's in this transportation strategy, it's difficult to isolate just what will or will not be covered. And more importantly, we made quite a focus on the investment of parking. You're spending $3 million in the next 10 years on the acquisition of more car parking in Ahuriri. You're spending $4.6 million on car parking in the city. There are substantial amounts of money dedicated to car parking, and yet we've got this issue about emissions. I just ask you, is it the right split? I think it just seems more of the same. And going forward into the future, I think this also is a concern. It just reinforces the dispersal of responsibility at an individual project leader level that leads to an overall lack of accountability, because all staff are focused on achieving their individual project outputs and no one is actually accountable for the overall outcome. Without strategies that have been developed with the whole community, how will well-aligned discrete projects with quantifiable performance measures eventuate? There have been no public conversations, no public processes, no agreed work programs in relation to cycling and active transport. Trust us does not cut it in the 21st century. So summarising, there is work to be done. The council does have a challenge with its water versus other expenditure. But regardless, the council should not be spending the scale of monies they are spending on parking when you've got this other challenge about emissions. The council needs to start getting real about creating safe, separated, on-road cycling infrastructure. The pathways have been good, but they're recreation. That's not active transport. They form parts of some of the cycle network, but they are not active transport. And paint is not protection. We've got bike lanes, but they're just paint on tarmac. They don't protect a cyclist. I'd like to give a quick shout out to the Taradale High School submission, number 459. You're going to hear Tom this evening. And I'd also express my disappointment in the management response. These are our most vulnerable road users. They have identified a real solution, they have identified real issues affecting them, and they've looked around the country and they've identified solutions from cities which have proven the examples they have shown work. And they're told by council that there's high traffic use in this area. It also involves high parking demands, and there is not the space for a segregated cycleway. So how has Nelson and Christchurch managed it? In closing, I'd like to just take you on a bit of a journey, a cycle tour. This was supposed to be the last, what have we got? Yes, we've got the last slide first. You'll all know this. It's been an interesting exercise, I think, for council and also for users. When I first rode this one, I rode around, I saw I came in from the Iron Pot, I saw the pedestrian crossings, I walked my bike across the pedestrian crossing against the traffic. I went onto the green spot because I thought that's cycleway. Then I saw all the impediments with the signs. I thought, God. And then I saw the cycleways actually was to the right of that. I could see the cycle sign further down. And as I cycled down there, I saw the sharrows on the road with the cars. I thought, oh, that's shared roadway. And then I got to the end, which was a little bit it just kind of stopped. And then I saw the pedestrian crossing, so I got off my bike and walked across. Avoided the band of cycle stands, which is great to see in terms of numbers. And then rejoined the cycleway round to West Shore. And it was only after I was looking at this for the purposes of this presentation that I saw clearly that what's wrong with this. I found it quite difficult and counterintuitive to go across traffic twice, to go on 250 metres of protected cycleway. And so did the 4 cyclists. You've got 2 cyclists going south and 2 cyclists going north. And I'd like to come back to that.
I'm sorry, Alan, to interrupt, but we have actually already gone over your allocated time, and we've got a very tight schedule with submitters. So.
Okay, I just quickly, a child and a mother. Why is the kid on the pathway? That's the Taradale example. They moved car parking from one side of the road. God almighty, a car is giving way to a cyclist. What happens in Napier? You put a barrier across so cyclists' attention is drawn away from the actual ride. Brightwater, 4,500 people, separated cycleway. Plan, you get bridges. That's a quote from your old expired strategy, which talks about the best way to use roads, which is the current roading network. Thank you. Sorry to muck that up.
No, that's quite all right. Very, very thorough and comprehensive submission. Thank you very much. We don't have time for questions, unfortunately, but thank you very much for your time today, Alan.
Well, if anyone wants to talk to us at any time, I'm available.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next we have Ryan Hambleton and Mark Aspin from Sport Hawke's Bay. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's hopefully a presentation going to appear shortly. While it does, I guess I'd like to first acknowledge the previous 2 submissions and submitters who I think highlighted a couple of challenging issues. Thank you. And always a challenge, isn't it? Cars versus vehicles versus cycles versus pedestrians, and balancing those. And I'll touch on cycling a little bit later. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge the ongoing and really significant support that this council has given over many years and continues to provide for sport and active recreation and play within Napier City. Sport NZ, I think it recognises that the amount that they can contribute to the sector just pales into insignificance alongside the amount that councils each year put into both facilities and services in this region. So just like to acknowledge and thank councillors very much for that. And I guess as one manifestation of that is the success in securing some government funding for the expansion of this facility, which I think is going to take place over the next 12 months or so. Just start with a couple of pretty pictures of things that can go on in Napier, just as a little break from words. That's the one on the right actually is ocean water swimming training, which we run over the summer. Back to some words, so and just briefly some insights from Sport NZ on the impact of COVID on participation levels. I doubt anyone's going to be terribly surprised by what you see there. Essentially, for adults, it was a bit of pick-up during lockdown, as I guess people didn't have to go to their work, so no excuse for not getting out for an hour or so. That rapidly dropped back below previous participation levels once the lockdown was over. For kids, there was a drop down during lockdown because I guess a lot of organised sport didn't happen and a lot of physical activity takes place in a physical school context. So drop down there, that's never been recovered. What we have also seen as a sort of generalisation is a shift from regular membership type participation belonging to a team to more ad hoc participation. So I think golf clubs would tell you their courses have never been busier. Squash clubs would say the same thing. Events are getting pretty well sold out, the ones that can run, but sports clubs are by and large reporting declining membership. So that's a trend we're seeing, relatively early days, I guess. Through our contract with the council, we've continued to support targeted communities in the city and looking forward to continuing to doing that over the next 12 months. Just some examples of things we've done there. We've also, as organisationally, committed to a couple of new roles, which I'm think councillors and council officers would have found helpful over the last year or so. One dedicated role, someone working in places and spaces, just to provide support for the bigger projects, I guess, link into Sport NZ's Spaces and Places team, and provide a neutral perspective on prospective developments. Second, and so a number of council officers would have dealt with Tina Hazlitt on various projects. Disability and inclusion, we've had Katie Owen working in that space for the last 18 months or so, and again part of disability reference group, but also advocacy on accessibility issues for significant projects. iWay, that's a joint initiative with Hastings Council, so I'll touch on that later, but certainly ongoing work in that space, and that's about getting people, getting kids to have the cycle skills they need to be able to navigate either roads or cycleways. So obviously infrastructure is one really important part of the equation, but so is having the skills to operate a bike, and I guess a third part is actually having a bike. Now, I haven't come today to ask you for money, and although if there is any lying around at the end, and you need somewhere to make it balance, I'm very happy to have some. But I'm probably going to be the only submitter that's come along to offer some money over these 2 days, or at least the prospect of some money. So Tū Manawa is a fund via Sport NZ, which we manage for the Hawke's Bay region. Previously there was a Kiwi Sport fund that probably most of you will be familiar with. There was roughly $340,000 to distribute throughout the region. That's now increased to $680,000. It covers play, active recreation and sport, whereas previously the majority of the fund went to sports organisations to deliver sports sessions in primary schools. It is available to pretty much anyone, and 2 councils have applied to the fund in the past 12 months, and we're hoping all 4 TAs in the region will over the next 12 months. And particularly in the area of play, I think the councils are the most logical applicants. So we can't fund play, we can't fund capital projects through the fund, but we can fund staff, we can fund equipment. So as I say, we've just had the first year of the fund. We're still learning as we go. It's committed for 4 years, so looking forward to working with the councils to solicit more applications. As I say, it's not only councils, but it's now available to councils. And just highlighted some examples there of successful applications within Napier City. We mentioned our system in our submission, and I won't expand on it here, but just our support for the council initiatives broadly in the play, active recreation and sport that appear in the LTP. So I guess commend those projects to the council. And lastly, in terms of what we would be very keen to see in the future. The first is Council Law's support for a regional play, active rec and support strategy. So we have had a plan which was essentially a facilities plan in place for the last 4 or 5 years. It's fair to say that hasn't been given great life to, and I think largely because it was a bit narrow in its focus and really limited to large facility builds, whereas play, active rec and sport around so much more than that, and a critical aspect of it is people, so how do we, and services, so how we make sure we've got enough people to deliver our aspirations for people in the community. I don't think it's a major undertaking to develop a plan. It's significant but not major. But I think the real benefit will be if we are trying to access funding that might be available on a national level. Then it really helps our region's case if we can say this is a project we've talked about as a region and this is where it ranks in our priorities. Secondly, and mentioned this at the start, and again the link to the previous two submitters, but Iway and particularly the development of cycle skills in our tamariki is going to be a really important part of developing, I guess people of our age, everyone could bike, everyone had a bike, everyone biked everywhere. It's not the case now, and unless there's some form of intervention, we'll grow up with a generation of relatively few people being able to bike. So we have, over the last 4 or 5 years, worked with both Hastings and Napier councils to run cycle skills program in schools. I think over the last 12 months that in Hastings schools outweighed Napier schools by about 4 to 1. So I guess I'd just encourage the council to look at the extent to which it wishes to engage further so that there's, I guess, greater parity between the experienced kids in Hastings will get and the experienced kids in Napier will get. That's all from me. I just, again, reiterate my earlier comments that really the contribution that the council has made and continued to make in this space is immense and really appreciated, and very happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Mark. Just quickly from me, in terms of support for Iway training, is that and financial support, is that the role of council? Okay.
Yep.
And that sits outside of the funding and service level agreement we had with yourselves?
Yes.
Obviously.
Yep.
Yep. Great. Councillor Crystal.
One of the things I don't see mentioned anywhere, and it's a serious thing in Hawke's Bay, is the lack of swimming and the kids' ability to swim.
Mm-hmm.
Some schools don't even have swimming sports because our kids can't swim.
Mm-hmm.
In a place that's surrounded by water and drownings, is there plans for this? And this to Manawa, is the funding to go towards trying to teach this? A lot of schools don't have pools anymore, but
yeah, it's a real issue, and I know the development of regional aquatic strategies are really hot topic. Learn to Swim is funded by Water Safety NZ and delivered by and large by Swim NZ. But you're right, the schools are more and more looking to not operate pools because of I guess not having the skills necessarily to teach kids and the health and safety risks perceived with them. So,
One more question and then we'll have to move on. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I like your idea for a regional sports play and active recreation strategy. You asked for support from us. As Sports Hawke's Bay, you seem quite in a good position to lead it. What sort of support are you looking for from us?
I guess there's two aspects to it. One is the someone to drive it, and I guess there's a discussion to be had among the TAs about at what level that sits. I know there's options that could sit at a CE level, a mayoral forum level potentially, or whatever. So just, I guess, some consensus from councils around that. And then I guess the likelihood there'd be a consultant to bring that all together, go through a consultation process. So some financial contribution, which Sport NZ would definitely be willing to make, but I don't think we'd be talking massive amounts of money on a per council basis.
Great, thank you very much for your time, Mark.
No problem, thank you all.
Next, I'd like to invite John Mcgifford, West Shore Residents Association. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to speak today to the West Shore Residents and Development Association submission to the long-term plan. I'd also like to open with another couple of thank yous. Firstly to Councillor Keith Price, who attends all the association's meetings and has been over this process that we've been going through as it relates to the submission, and has encouraged the submission to the LTP. And thanks also to Napier City Council Director for Infrastructure, John Kingsford, who has also made himself available to discuss with the association our concerns and has provided guidance around the next steps. In repeat of the submission, through its membership, the association has been concerned for some time about the level of council investment in the suburb of West Shore and how that is resulting in the suburb looking dilapidated and neglected. This in turn decreases the desirability and livability of West Shore. This lack of attention to the suburb is even more apparent when comparing with most other suburbs in Napier. This is not only concerning but also raises frustrations when concerning the amount of rates West Shore residents pay compared to many other suburbs that are far better presented. The residents are not so naive as to think that the amount of rates paid equates to the amount of investment in the suburb, but by the look of West Shore, the level of investment in infrastructure would appear quite nominal. In making this presentation, I reference the feedback from the residents as detailed in the submission. And gain and repeat of information councillors have already received, there's been significant engagement with the residents around the concerns, including a survey, and there has now been 3 consultation periods following the results of that survey. It's very clear from this graph where the residents' greatest concerns lie, which the association has developed an action and priority plan for. It's not the present to present that today, but rather work proactively with council officers around that plan when appropriate. I would, however, like to share some of the feedback we received around the residents' concerns. In doing so, I've excluded direct reference to the motel situation, as we appreciate this is a national issue, which is well out of our hands at this time. Councillors would note, though, the motel situation still warrants some mention of the feedback, which I'll go through now. Just before I do, though, of course, Lauren has these slides, and I'm sure can share, so I won't dwell too much and take up too much of your time around them. But it's clearly indicated the lack of speed deterrents are a real concern, and West Shore. We're in the situation where West Shore's obviously flat. The Esplanade is 1 kilometre long. It has 1 speed hump, about halfway along it, so that probably looks after about 50 to 100 metres, I suppose, of speeding. The Charles Street is 1 kilometre long, pretty much straight, no speed deterrents. Goes past a busy primary school and a busy little shopping centre. Ferguson Avenue is probably about 600, 700 metres long, mostly straight, no speed deterrents. Goes past a children's playground and goes past the primary school as well. the speed monitoring's been done across both of all the streets, and it averages probably about 55 kilometres an hour, and that is above the speed limit. I know it's not exceedingly high, but clearly it's an average, so there's a lot going a lot faster. In fact, speeds of over 100 kilometres an hour have been measured on both Charles Street and West Shore, so it's a real concern. I'll just refer it back to an early comment about comparing to other suburbs. I know that other suburbs are deserving of the speed deterrents they've got, being put in place for a reason. I look at Shakespeare Road, which just had, I think, 5 speed humps put up there. It's uphill and downhill too, of course. We're flat and we've got nothing. Second is around the footpaths and parking, and clearly this is a real concern to West Shore residents as well. The footpaths are just in an absolute shocking state. I know West Shore's an old suburb, but there's not much has been done in the whole time that it's been there. The footpaths are very wide. The road is narrow when cars are parked on the side of the road, so cars have to park on the footpath to allow traffic to get past, and that's further damaging the footpaths. It's just a very unsatisfactory state of affairs, which could be very easily remedied with sculpting of footpaths, which would make it a lot safer for the traffic and people getting in and out of their cars as well. To currently park curbside, they're opening their doors into reasonably busy traffic. It's also quite dangerous too when 2 cars are coming alongside, heading towards each other, ongoing traffic, because there's not room for them to pass. The overhead power lines, again, we appreciate this isn't an issue that council have too much control over, but West Shore's probably about the only suburb, or one of the very few suburbs, I'd say, in Napier that still has an overhead power network, and probably across Hawke's Bay as well too. We're asking council here for their support and campaigning unison about getting all our lines put underground. It's partly done, as is indicated in the feedback there, but it's a long way from being fully completed. Improving the security, there's a real feeling of people being unsafe in West Shore at the moment, and I spoke earlier about the motel situation that contributes to it. But as you can see, people just don't feel safe in their houses, safe living there. There is a criminal element. There's a lot of bad behaviour goes on the beach reserve, which the police are very good at addressing, but it's ongoing and frustrating. Landscaping and general maintenance, there's been nothing done for years. We have a few trees along West Shore, which are mostly big pohutukawas whose roots are cracking the concrete. There's no landscaping, there's no gardening done. This is throughout the whole of West Shore. The beach reserve is in reasonable condition, but it needs ongoing improvements and maintenance as well, given how well frequented it is. And just the last comment there, that West Shore's seen as being pretty generally scruffy. Improved signage, I suppose we need that across the whole city, but there's some areas around West Shore that really need it, and there's a couple of priorities here highlighted in the feedback. And other, pretty much there are rubbish bins are in scarce supply along the beach reserve. We're by a beach. We have seagulls. The current ones, the birds scavenge through and drop rubbish all over the place. Excuse me, looking at this on my eyesight's not good enough to see the laptop. The Freedom camping site is a concern there. It's right in front of residents who have paid a lot of money for their properties, and the Freedom campers get the front door, front row seat, and they don't comply mostly with a lot of the conditions around Freedom camping. There's a toilet block sitting down right in front of again the residents along the esplanade. We don't believe it's probably correctly plumbed. I think it still runs on a what do they call it? Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, septic tank. Thank you very much. But once that falls up, there's opportunity for the effluent to flow out into the sea. And the last point was to consider some local recycling options for the suburb. I've just got some photos to show you, and I know you're going to think that I've just taken the photos of the worst possible places in West Shore, but this I can assure you can go anywhere West Shore, and I implore you to do so and have a look about what our suburb looks like. The first one is our footpaths, and once again I can assure you this is like all throughout West Shore. they're all patched. There's just so many potholes. It's dangerous. The second photo indicates how our residents have to park on the footpath, and then, as I said before, it's just causing more damage to the footpaths. The third one is clearly just a photo, once again, of footpaths of all the lichen and moss. That's very prevalent right across West Shore on our footpaths. Next slide. I think the first one's a curb. It's that damaged, I'm not sure anymore. I'm pretty sure that was a curb when I took the photo. Once again, unacceptable. Look at the tree. That's an example of how our trees are pruned along West Shore. They're done on one side, with a lot of foliage hanging across the other side. Third, just a snapshot of our lovely power lines that we've got pretty much all across West Shore. And the final pictures, once again, with a tree, a great example of the landscaping we have in the first picture. Notice even all the broken concrete around the bottom of it. It's just a terrible look. We have another one of overhead power lines and another sort of shingle fold hole, which is once again dangerous. I'd just like to repeat the request of the submission now, being that the West Shore, that the association requests that council assign council officers to consider the needs of West Shore and to work with the association's committee in designing plans and developing timeframes to meet the identified needs. Once plans are fully agreed and costed, that a rejuvenation project for West Shore is budgeted for over the timeframes to be identified in the plan. The association would like to see its projects undertaken over council's next 2 financial years. In closing, I just want to make it clear that this is not intended as a beat up on council. What it is a plea for council to work proactively with the association to enhance the suburb's desirability and livability. This will not only benefit the residents, many have invested heavily in the suburb, but the whole of the city, all of access to this popular beachside location. It will also improve the experience for those from outside the region that visit and enjoy West Shore, as well as making it a more pleasurable viewing experience for those on the tour buses that often drive through the suburb. It is important to remember that West Shore is a shop window from Napier when coming from the north and from the airport, and as we all know, first impressions are really important. So let's not let our beautiful city down. Let's make a great impression from the start. Again, thank you for the opportunity to talk, and would welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, John. Firstly, I'd just like to commend the association on the work that you've done and, canvassing and consulting with residents to come up with this to present to council. Well done. And I know you are a very active residents association, so congratulate you on that.
Thank you, Kirsten.
And I'll just open up to councillors for any questions they may have. Councillor Bogue.
Thank you for this very comprehensive report. Have you invited council officers to your meetings to discuss any of these things?
Yes, John Kingsford came to one who we thought was the most appropriate person
Right.
late last year, Keith, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I've found in other community groups that they've got sort of an ongoing roster almost of council officers that are related to the issues in their community. That's been quite helpful.
We are very well engaged. As I said, John Kingsford came along. We often speak to Deborah Stewart, Natasha Mackey, so we are fairly well engaged with council officers.
Thank you.
Just one more question from Councillor McGrath.
Yes, just through the chair, with regards to the power lines, have you guys, as an association, contacted Unison about that? And have they given you a timeline?
Yes, we have been in touch with Unison. The last time it was probably a couple of years ago. We were told it's not in their plans.
Disappointing.
Thank you very much for your time today, John. And I'd like to invite Councillor Neil Curtin from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. Oh, and Katrina Brunton. Sorry, I didn't think you were here.
We haven't got a presentation, so shine some light on it.
Hasn't got a presentation.
Well, many thanks to Mayor Wise for hosting the Regional Council, and I'd just like to introduce Katrina Brunton, who's our Group Manager, Policy and Regulation. Got that one right. And an apology from James Palmer, Chief Executive, who's unable to be here today, but he did want to come along. So, look, you've seen our submission. I'm sure you've read it. I haven't seen the staff comment on it. I'm sure it was glowing. I just want to perhaps focus on a couple of issues that I think are sort of the nub of the submission. We've had quite a serious discussion about collaboration with our local authority counterparts, and hopefully we've been able to demonstrate that over the last year or two. And I would like to congratulate and commend Deputy Mayor Annette Brosnan, Api Tipene and Hayley Brown for their contribution, particularly in working with us on the regional park proposal. And I'm pleased to see that we were able to pull together a very comprehensive plan that demonstrates that level of collaboration between the groups. So thank you for that. And sitting behind that is a great deal of collaboration between staff, which I'm very pleased to see taking place. Probably for the first time in my 2 decades on council that we've been able to facilitate that sort of level of engagement. The submission itself, two issues stick out to me. One is water, and again the council's view and investment in water infrastructure is to be commended. It's a major investment, and again I think there's room for very substantive collaboration between the regional council and Napier City in pulling together that plan. The devil's in the detail, as you know, and as the consenting authority, I think we have a vested interest in working with you and making sure we get the best outcome. Just one comment on the proposal around your infrastructure spend around drinking water. I just wondered whether you could consider the notion of purple pipes, and I'm sure some of you have heard of that concept. So that's the recycling of water back through a different network of pipes, fortunately, purple pipes, so taking the wastewater from your sewage system and stormwater and bringing it back to the household to put on the garden, etc. So very much part of the scene in most cities of the world, particularly those without much water. And it brings us to the nub of other parts of the submission around the tank processes. We are facing a major shift in the way we use water, and we will work closely with you in devising ways of conserving water at every opportunity. A comment on the regional park concept, which the council's congratulated heartily for looking to invest so substantially in it. One of the things that I'd suggest that is perhaps missing from the plan, as I see it from your perspective, is the biodiversity outcomes that are inevitable from it, and I think your plan undersells the benefits that are derived from that component. So you may want to add some comments in there. I really appreciate your investments in wastewater. I can get me off your back in terms of comment on discharges, but if we move to a zero tolerance on and set ourselves some goals in that regard, I think we'll be doing a huge service to the future of the city. Finally, I just want to make this comment. We go through a long process sitting around this table, you on your side, us on ours. We hear hundreds of submissions, we see hundreds and hundreds of written submissions, and it's a huge task to listen to the community. And listening this morning to the concerns, no matter how small and insignificant they may appear, they're not. They're really important parts of the democratic process. My concern is that we're potentially staring down the barrel of losing that important democratic process and that opportunity. We're just about to have our processes gutted out. If we lose 3 waters, your balance sheet will look very skinny indeed. And I'm suggesting in the name of this collaborative approach that we work very closely together in establishing our own Hawke's Bay regional three waters approach. I can see the day, and it's only the narrow window that's facing us now, where you won't be talking water solutions around this table. You won't be talking chlorination. That won't be in your orbit to be doing. That'll be done from either Wellington or Palmerston North. That's just around the corner. I haven't seen, in my almost 3 decades in politics, a government and public sector, Wellington-based, that's more determined to gut out local government than I've seen in this latest round. So I think we can do something. I think there seems to be a bit of a divide. The southern parts of the region are more enthusiastic. I can see why Napier and Wairau are not. Will be paying. The water bill will be something like $300 or $400 a household once Watercare takes over, or whatever the name of this is. So I think we can do something. We can get together. There's the facility, for example, of the Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company to call upon, and a joint approach to make sure we retain control in the region. And that's an offer on the table, and I hope that you'll consider that, and that we can have an earnest conversation, a collaboration around confronting the biggest challenge to local government that we'll see in our lifetime. That's about it for me. I think there may or may not be a question. Katrina, have you got something to add?
So I'll just be quick. I'll give a quick summary of our submission. No intent of reading it. Hawke's Bay Regional Council, without a doubt, has made climate change a focus, and it's at the heart of everything we do. But as a region, we need to be much more aggressive to achieve the transformational changes required to reduce our environmental footprint and live more sustainably. We have focused our submission without a doubt on the three waters. There is important work that needs to be done in this regard. HBRC would encourage Napier City to not only focus on issues of drinking water quality, dirty water, chlorination, but in fact to focus on the city's impact on the water taken from the environment. Without a doubt, Te Mana Otawai puts foremost the pressures, or it puts foremost the importance on restoring our region's waters, rivers, streams, lakes. And so we would ask NCC to focus on efficient use of drinking water. Neil Curtin mentioned the tank plan change, which we are currently in the middle of hearing submissions on. It is well accepted that the cumulative extraction from the Heatonga Plains aquifers has reached the limits of acceptable effects on groundwater levels and the water flows in connected surface water bodies across the plains and the Ngorororo River. And while community and health needs will be a priority, it cannot be guaranteed in the future to the detriment of ecological health. NCC will need to consider water storage and innovative measures to meet future water demand for its growth. In terms of stormwater, a significant issue for NCC continues to be the way urban stormwater is currently managed. The quality of discharges from the urban networks to the Ahuriri estuary, from the Thames Street, Time Street and main stormwater channels have significant levels of contamination. HBRC and NCC officers are working very closely in this regard, and we will continue to work closely in this regard. We both want the same outcomes, and it is important that we continue to do that. We would encourage NCC to invest more resource into the investigation, management and regulation of point source discharges into the stormwater system. In terms of wastewater, sorry, I'm just flicking very quickly through. Wastewater contamination events, working towards a zero tolerance, as Councillor Curtin mentioned, is essential. There is, without a doubt, HBRC have sent a very clear signal to the region that our regulatory compliance is first and foremost top of our mind. In terms of increased environmental standards, we intend to enforce these more rigorously. Climate change is expected to bring more frequent and intense storm events, which will exacerbate the problem if not addressed in a timely manner. And lastly, but importantly, as we've heard this morning from a number of submitters on public transport, safety, convenience, is not there currently in terms of our passenger transport and walking and cycling. We have huge numbers of children who drive to school because they can't walk or cycle. And we would like to work closely with Napier City to improve the situation so that we can create a more resilient community and encourage more active walking and cycling. Our last point to NCC is we are all facing challenges, HBRC, NCC, Hastings, Wairoa, Central Hawke's Bay, in terms of our infrastructure and environmental challenges. Capital budgets are encouraged, absolutely, and we support that which NCC has put forward. We would also ask NCC not to lose focus on operational budgets and to look at those and make sure that the operational budgets are increased alongside such that you will be able to deliver your capital budgets. Thank you. Sorry, speeding.
That's all good. Thank you both very much. I will open just quickly for any questions from councillors. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Tanakwe, thank you very much for your submission, Neil and Katrina, and an acknowledgement, Neil, back to you and your Napier counterparts. I think the closeness of our collaboration in the governance space has never been better, and would like to acknowledge that.
Sure.
Just a question from me. In terms of the submission, one of the comments that you make in there is around requesting Napier City make a zero tolerance allowance for wastewater overflow discharges in storm events. I suppose I'm interested in that because I understand from a practical perspective that the infrastructure guidelines nationally require us to design our piped networks to 1 in 10 year events. Like we saw in November, we had a 1 in 250 year event. So in terms of that request in your submission, I suppose I'm looking for confirmation if you're asking us to, I suppose, theoretically make a acknowledgement that that's something we don't want to see and we'll do everything we can to avoid, or are you asking us to design a 1 in 250 year, say, stormwater network?
I think what the community of Hawke's Bay and New Zealand is clearly signalling is that discharges of effluent into any water body is no longer appropriate. Climate change, as you well know, is seeing greater storm events, and we need to be able to prepare for those. So in setting our infrastructure strategies looking forward, we need to be able to plan for greater events more often.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't help you a lot there, does it?
I understand where you're at, thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Next we have Jeannie Brigham, please. Welcome, Jeannie.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you today. I live in West Shore. Some of the points have already been covered by John, was it, from the Residents Association. Unfortunately, I missed out on that particular, the questionnaire and so on that was sent around, even though we are members of the Residents Association. We were away at the time and didn't participate. So one or two of my things might do in fact overlap, but with maybe a slightly different point of view. So as I have said, my main concern is the fact that there's no mention of West Shore in the long-term plan. And I've grouped it under the overhead power lines, which has already been illustrated. The lack of trees in the streets, and also those lights along Miani Quay. Now, so as far as the power lines are concerned, I wasn't aware that it was not the council who are responsible for that, but I would back what John has already said. If you know, the council is able to influence Unison in any way to do something about those overhead lines, not only from the point of view of the visual pollution, which is pretty horrible in this day and age, but also I mean, we live in a tsunami zone, probably one of the worst in Napier in terms of trying to get to safety. And I just made the point that, you know, it could be an additional hazard for us if, in fact, power lines topple. I don't know. It's shingly soiled. They may well topple, and there'd be live wires, and it's just something else that could be a hazard in trying to get as fast as we can up to the hill on our bikes or whatever. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the lack of shade trees. Now, look, I think our streets are actually they're pretty wide, and with the pavements as well, as compared with having lived on the hill for 25 years, I find the streets in West Shore, in fact, are very broad and would absolutely lend themselves to having trees. And the reason I suggested jacaranda trees is, one, because I like jacaranda trees, and secondly, because our neighbour has got a lovely jacaranda tree, so I know that they grow well there. And of course, there's jacaranda trees in other parts of Napier. But I certainly wouldn't recommend the Putakawa trees as a street tree for the reasons that have been outlined, you know, the lifting the pavements and so on. But it would just be nice to have some trees. And under that heading, I also mentioned that, you know, I don't know if this has already been done, but with these huge car parks, and Mitre 10 is a really good example, not one tree in the whole car park, not even a shrub. And there's the lack of shade, it's the lack of trees to absorb carbon and all the rest of it. And I know that certainly in parts of Australia, for example, it's part of the consent process is that they have to, the developer has to also plant some shade trees. So it would be quite, yes, with climate change and all that we all know about, that I think that would be environmentally good thing to do. Not trees that are going to cause a huge trouble with shading properties or leaves or something like that. So obviously, you know, as they say, the right tree in the right place. Now, my third point, street light pollution. Well, the thing is, since I've actually written this submission, this has actually been done. I just cannot believe it. And I want to thank whoever was responsible for changing those orange lights down the Aniki to less intensive, more like a street light. They're still very high, but they're more like a street light. And I just couldn't believe it that it's actually been done, and it's just improved the nighttime environment no end. And so thank you very much. I made the point about the other councils being aware of the dark sky and the attraction for locals and tourists. This was the article that I referred to, the travel supplement. Not one place in Napier, all of Hawke's Bay was mentioned in this. It covered all of New Zealand. But anyway, it's no longer an issue. It's been done. So I'd just like to repeat my thanks for whoever made that happen, and just to say that I'm sure also it'll be a much better nighttime environment for the godwits and the other birds that are protected along just across the road there, as part of that wildlife reserve. And well, that's it from me, short and sweet.
Thank you very much, Jeannie. Do we have any questions from councillors? Thank you so much for your time today and making a submission. I'd like to invite Duncan Watson, please. Welcome, Duncan.
I have a confession, conflict of interest. Jeannie is my wife. I also have an admission that the photograph of the West Shore Association of the vehicle parked on the footpath was my Hilux. Your Worship, the Mayor, Councillors, thanks for the opportunity to attend today. It's been a tumultuous 12, 18 months for you. And I think as a ratepayer, as a member of the public, I think you need to be given a lot of credit for getting to where you are today, and most significantly, pivoting the long-term plan to focus on priority items. And the Three Water project, that is what the public demand and require. So I think you've shifted the direction of a vessel. I'm a sailor these days. I think the vessel is heading in a better direction, but there's still risks there, and it's those points which I'd like to address today. I don't propose to read in detail my submission because it's 5 pages, but I'll just talk to certain points. If there's any questions as I go through them, please put them to me. Water supply, yes, I think you're on the right track there. And the chlorine issue is something which can wait until you've got the money, and other priorities I think are attended to. The stormwater, well, the Ahuriri Regional Park, and I think Councillor Brosnan's talking point article was excellent. And I learnt a lot from that as to what actually the council is planning to do, because there seems to be a hell of a gap from 2 years from that master plan, which had it was great in pictorial terms, but there was a lot of mistakes there, I felt. But there is no Ahuriri master plan final at this stage. So as a member of the public, I don't know what has been approved and what is not going to go ahead. And it's difficult to actually give comments on the project overall. The regional park, I think, it's an excellent opportunity, and it's the only time where you folk are ever going to have the opportunity to actually leave a legacy for your children and grandchildren. So don't stuff it up. The first thing is zoning. That has to be addressed. But I don't think there should be any objection from the business community on that one, because no insurer would, I think, be backing any project down there. And there's lessons to be learnt for council on that as well. So your infrastructural development there, no fast food joints or other commercial activities down there either. Just utilise Lagoon Farm as a space for conservation and your stormwater development. I was heartened with Neil Curtin's comments of the cooperation between Regional Council and Napier. Long may that continue. One thing which I don't think was picked up in your potential features of the park, and Neil mentioned it himself, I think you've undersold yourself on this project. Just wearing a business hat, I can see $10, $15, $20 million a year coming from this project if it's designed properly in terms of ecotourism. I've just done one of the 3 walks down the route burn, $3,000 for 2 or 3 days. You know, money well spent. Even Forest and Bird are running eco tours for donors and their members and making $80,000 every 6 months. So there's nothing repugnant in the idea of the public having the opportunity to see what's going on down in that wetland area. And I really do think it's a potential for a tourist hub for Napier, for ecotourism to, if you link in and you design it properly in the regional park there, to link in with what the regional council is doing down at Waitangi and the Toki and the Lake Tutere and other wetlands in Hawke's Bay, Napier can become a eco-tourist hub. It's an opportunity to broaden the tourist appeal. And it fits in so well with your cycleways, with your forks and all that type of stuff. There's some key elements that you need to incorporate, and I mentioned those on page 2. But the emphasis has to be on habitat. No dogs, no drones, all those types of things as well. The name to be attributed to this park, I'd say don't be in a hurry to have that competition yet. I can recall a distinct unpleasant undertone when it came to parklands in the Rotu. Don't rip the scab off something unnecessarily until you've got something designed and something cogent to be able to sell. Other Hariri estuary projects, well, as I mentioned, we haven't got detail as to what the final master plan is. So I'm really heartened with Annette Brosnan's announcement that there'll be no play equipment or green mown and lawns. That's great. You can continue that and just focus on habitat. I think you'll have a winner there. In terms of the upper estuary, I think the Regional Council is doing a good job in what they're doing up there. So whatever they're doing, you can model similar further down. The mid-estuary, it could benefit from much better signage. There's too many dogs, there's too many cyclists in the areas where they shouldn't be. And I think there has to be, the central point is that that's a wildlife refuge. And when I see windsurfers and paragliders in that area, the wildlife just disappears. And that's actually something which is promoted by the Napier City Council on its website. I think it just has to be handled more sensitively. Pandora Pond, I think you're playing Russian roulette there. And if I might say so, the yardstick I use is that would I let my children or grandchildren, knowing what I do in the Pandora Pond, swim there? And I'd have to say no. But you are letting the most possibly vulnerable and ill-informed people in the community to be swimming there. And it's only a matter of time before I think, as I said, Russian roulette, there's going to be another paratyphoid outbreak or worse. The West Shore plan to illuminate the West Shore Bridge, I think that's 1960s, 1970s thinking. Don't. There's too much light as it is in the inner harbour. The inner harbour I mentioned here, as a yachty, I'm disappointed to see that there's still some boaties and yachties who are using the inner harbour as their toilet. Now, you've got a number of council moorings over there. There's 6 or 8 liverboards there. There's no toilet block. Where do they go to the toilet? Don't have to be a rocket science. But that can be simply fixed by putting a padlock on their seacock so they can't flush into the inner harbour. And if they're caught, no warning, they're out. That's as if you wish to have liverboards there. And the Napier Sailing Club, I think, is in the same category. I'm a member of the club. I've produced photographic evidence. I see fishermen coming in and gutting their fish in the marina. That's just no longer acceptable. I think Napier City Council is generally trying to limit polluting industries in Pandora. But if there's anything which the Regional Council is doing better, and that's enforcing regulation. And for example, the Scales incident of a few years ago, to be slapped with a $6,000 fine. That's a joke, you know. As a defence lawyer acting for Scales, I'd be charging 60 grand minimum, and they get a $6,000 fine after 2 or 3 years. So naming and shaming is quite legitimate, and it seems to be very effective for the Regional Council. And you know, if you get caught putting your tyres and your fridges and other stuff on an orchard fire, you get 20, 30 grand and your name's in the paper. The word gets around pretty quickly. The West Shore Point upgrade, I don't know whether you've actually walked around the point at West Shore, but there's an absolutely a jewel, a little gem of a paddling pool there for mums and dads to take their kids paddling there. But there's been an encroachment by adjoining Wakariri Avenue owners, and I think council should just basically reclaim public land. It's a beautiful, beautiful little site there for people who want to take their kids in the paddling pool. It's safe, and that would enhance cycleways and elsewhere. Finally, on wastewater, I think this is one area where council is going to waste $50 million or so on their sewer outfall pipe. You won't be able to do it for $50 million. I'm involved in some exports, the BHP iron ore is one illustration. When iron ore goes from $60 a tonne to $100, $150, $200, $230 a tonne, the steel that comes into New Zealand is going to be probably double what it is today, if you can get it. Now, a sewer outfall pipe, I think, also has to be seen in the context of global warming. If it's getting smashed now, it sure as hell is going to get smashed within the next few years or the next 10 years. You've got a resource consent, which you probably need to have from the Regional Council in 2030. I'd be surprised that the Regional Council will permit sewage still to be pumped offshore. And look at it from another angle. If you're a farmer or if you live in the country, you're not allowed to actually have your cattle in walkways and waterways. You're not allowed to have a septic tank even these days. The long drop days are over. But if you're a townie, when it comes to Napier, basically other than taking a few chunky bits out of the miller screening plant, you squirt your sewage out to sea. And you're planning to do that for the next 30 years? That's wrong. You've got 10 years now, while land is available at Awatoto, when capital is still cheap, to have a land-based sewage system. Move with the times. And if you don't, I think you'll find that the decisions will be taken out of your hands, which is already a possibility with Wellington stepping in. So it's time to show leadership in that area.
Sorry, Duncan, I'm going to have to interrupt. We've already gone over time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your submission, very comprehensive, and your time today. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Maureen Miller, please. Welcome, Maureen.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ki ngā rangatira me te pau o te kaunihiro ahuriri, tēnei te mihi mahana ki a koutou. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to my submission, which was supported by a number of members who work and reside within the community of Maraenui. I am the CEO of Rōpeiwi Trust. However, due to time constraints, we were unable to formally submit a submission on behalf of the board of Rōpeiwi Trust. Therefore, this submission is not on behalf of Rōpeiwi Trust, but myself and various members or staff that were present in the office that could sign the document prior to it being submitted. I am sure that you've had the opportunity to read my submission, which is clearly focused on Te Pihina. And I've also had a chance to read a rather comprehensive management comment or more or less justification what has been undertaken in terms of consultation. Just a key point on that, it says that I led Te Huarahi Aratika. There were actually two other partners in that, and that was the Napier City Council and Housing New Zealand, as it was known at the time. And the three of us were partners within Huarahi Aratika. On the 26th of May, we had the community manager from Napier City Council come and do a presentation to members of staff who were deeply concerned about the lack of consultation and were unaware of some of the changes that were being proposed. And during that time, it was found that the splash pad was going ahead and work would start in June. This is a big piece of work that is going to happen, and once again being told at the last hurdle that this was occurring and obviously would affect us was a major disappointment that the opportunity to consult was not afforded to us. We were established in the 1980s and present in Maraenui since 2005. We are what you would determine a constant in the Maraenui shopping centre and can help and tell you what is actually happening. that is over 16 years' presence in Maraenui. Are we not a key stakeholder? I would have thought yes, we are. We're close on 40 staff and the largest provider of staff in Maraenui, who are constantly, and we are constantly recruiting. Within the area of Maraenui and Ahuriri, good manners should have prevailed, or common courtesy. Please talk to us. I recall one of the events held in Maraenui. A quick duck in the door by an ambassador on the day alluded us to the fact that there was an event happening, and I received a text informing me of the event while in a hurry that morning. I expressed my anger at what was happening when I went to have a look. How disappointing, therefore, to see that the entertainment, MC and barbers were all from the suburb of Flaxmere, and who were quite proud to announce that. It raised a number of issues for me. Why did you not use local talent? If not from Maraenui, then why not from Ahuriri? When I questioned one of the ambassadors what did Te Pihina Ake mean, she had no idea. Yet Te Wanaranui was on a video explaining the meaning. Once again, I want to say how disappointing that you did not know what talent was already in your own community. And Napier City Council did say to me that all the people there were from Maraenui though. That little act of community consultation spoke volumes in that you have no idea what is actually happening out in the community. I heard the submission from Te Tauwhenua Te Whanganui yesterday, and it was clear that consultation had not occurred with them. Know who you should be speaking to before you make decisions or think what should happen. The last thing, and this is a biggie, the name Te Pihina Ake was a name gifted by Te Wanaranui, which means if you plant good thoughts, you will reap the rewards. That was the original name given. However, in this process, the Ake has dropped off and is now known as Pihina. And I spoke to him as recently as late yesterday afternoon, just to double check. And I know that a submission was submitted on behalf of Pukimuki Marae. And if you have a look at it, the bottom half is handwritten, and what he's written in there actually was the background to the name Te Pihina Ake. The Ake means to uplift, future proofing for the future. So that's me. I know you've read my submission. There are actually bigger things out there that need addressing. $11.5 million is a lot of money for a suburb. And I think you need to actually think a bit wider. I've heard submissions from the people in West Shore about their footpaths. Geez, I don't think the footpaths have been changed since the suburb got established. So it's actually big. Big stuff needs to be addressed. The safety of Napier citizens, the housing issue, as well as the water. But my submission purely is on Te Pihina Ake. And that's me. I was going to be very quick. Is there any questions anyone wants to ask me?
Thank you, Maureen. Any questions from councillors? Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Kia ora, Maureen. Thank you very much for your submission. I just want to make sure that I understand, I suppose, the bottom paragraph of your submission properly, and that is basically that both the splash pad and Te Pihina Ake have kind of been thrust upon us, and you prefer that we reprioritise the funding elsewhere. Is that
well?
Correct?
I believe, and maybe I've got this wrong, but the splash pad is going ahead, and that people are coming in June to start putting stuff together. I'm just really unsure. That's what we got told in May. One of the concerns I had obviously was from the flooding. If you know the Maraenui car park at all, you actually have to go down to get out. And when you go down during that flooding, the water rose right up. So my concern is what's going to happen with the excess water? Is it going to go down there and we're going to end up with problems in the drainage? However, I have been reassured that someone from council has had a look at it. Have no idea though. no one's actually bothered to come back and say anything more. So that's my biggest probably gripe, is that the lack of consultation. We have been down in the Maraenui Shopping Centre for 16 years, since 2005, and yet, things are happening around us, it affects us, and, you know, common courtesy would have said, come and speak to the shop owners. There are a number of shop owners that were unaware of what was happening. Don't do it around us. That is just rude. Anyone else? Like I said, I'm going to be very quick.
Thank you for your time, Maureen.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. And now could we invite, please, Waitiria Greeks.
Welcome.
Kia ora. Kia ora tātou tuatai me a tukumi kia koutou kua tai mai I tēnei rā. Ko Waiahau, ko Waitiria Greeks tōku ingoa, he uri au no Ngāti Maniapoto me te whakatohia. Engari e tupu ahau ki konei ki Ngāti Kahungunu. So I just came here today to speak on my submission. I brought my friend Te Aroha, who I'll let introduce herself. But we're here today to speak on our submission for the Te Pihinga project. We actually submitted and agreed with the submission that was proposed by the council, which was billed in 2 years. In saying that, I just want to support the kōrero that just come from Maureen, because I actually agree with the consultation process. Probably wasn't done the best because we're actually quite connected into the community, and I know a lot of the community weren't consulted on that, but I also know that the community doesn't engage because of these types of issues. So there's two sides to that, but as a mother who is raising the next generation of Maraenui children, I think the Te Pihinga project is needed in our community, because our children, we have a very young generation in our community, and our children don't have much opportunities within our community. Growing up in Maraenui, we also didn't have much communities. We had to, opportunities, but we had to go out and find them. And with a space like Te Pihinga, I think it will allow a lot of our tamariki to have more opportunities. For example, a lot of the people from the community want to do good things for the rangatahi, like provide cooking classes or do boxing classes, but we don't even have anything as simple as a base to be able to provide these for our tamariki. There's lots of benefits also that I see from having a community centre. It's just a hub for our people and just a space for us to start actually building kaupapa that are going to benefit the social issues that are present within Maraenui. So I'm going to let Te Aroha speak to what she says.
Kia ora koutou, ko Waiau, ko Te Aroha Han tōku ingoa, he uri ahau ngō Ngāti Hēneru, Te Aroha Taranaki me Kukiarani Hoki. Kia ora everyone, I'm Te Aroha or TA. I supported the a submission for Te Pihinga as well. We also rallied and supported other people from our generation to put through their thoughts and voices on why Te Pihinga is important for us in Maraenui, to have a vibrant and I suppose a space for us for this generation. I come from 4 generations living in Maraenui, and I'm also a homeowner and ratepayer in Maraenui. I live there now with my 3 children, and just providing that space for us to have opportunities to engage in workforce, engage in opportunities for sporting, not having to move out of I've been in the sports field, but actually having to go to Bridgepark or go to other spaces where they can provide that community feel for me and my tamariki, growing in a space and pathways for us. So providing Te Pihinga would actually open up opportunities for us to actually have an opportunity to show the talent that Maureen was talking about, those untapped potential that these whānau actually have these talents in Maraenui, but we move out of our own suburb to actually keep levelling up. And by providing the space here, we're actually able to bring our skills together and actually enhance what we're actually doing in our community, like what we're doing now in our own internal mahi, but bringing our whānau back to our community is where we see fit, not having to move out of our community to find opportunities for ourselves to continue the growth. But yeah,
I think it's important also to stress that it needs to be community-led, and that's where the consultation needs to come. Like, there are stakeholders in the community, but there's also just everyday people in the community who actually are entitled to a say and input, who actually should have input, because at the end of the day, they're affected as well. People that walk beside the vulnerable in the community, that sit with them every single day, not just the people that are like working, living, or operating on a higher level. There's people on this level in the community who also deserve a chance to be engaged in these conversations. Also want to just use the example of Levi, what he's brought to the community with the pod. So he's been able to activate the community with something as small as a shipping container with exercise equipment, but even now it's really getting too cold in the winter, but somehow people are still going because they support that kaupapa, and it's a positive thing for our community. So imagine what we could do if we brought something bigger with more facilities in it to be able to untap, or to be able to help our people bring their potential. That is where I see the support on. So I'm looking at Te Pihinga from a grassroots level. I don't know the higher level stuff as much, but I do think the community consultation and having the community involved is key to making it successful. Kia ora, that's all.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, mai te reo and te aroha. And I guess talking from my perspective, I think that having a real co-design process with the Maraenui community is, you know, if we decide to proceed with Te Pihinga, is vital to the success of it. And probably not a conversation for today because of time constraints, but would be really keen to sit down with both of you at some stage and hear your ideas about how we could engage with the local community there, recognising that, as you said, sometimes it's not through lack of trying on our behalf, but we might not be doing it quite right. There might be better ways to be doing it, and would love to hear your ideas on that some stage in the future. I'll just open and see if Councillor Crown.
Oh, kia ora kōrua. It's lovely to hear in the last two submissions that this community is really important to people. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge that. But my question to you is that in a lot of the feedback that we've received, there has been mention of other facilities already available within the Maraenui community, so the marae and the sports club. Why do you think Te Pihinga is different, or that perhaps those facilities aren't appropriate for the type of mahi that Te Pihinga is designed to set up to achieve?
Well, I think the purpose of a marae isn't. The purpose of a marae is for bringing whānau together, whanaungatanga, all that type of stuff. It's not so much for creating programs like after school care, for example, for whānau and Maraenui. We have an after school care program that our tamariki are on, and they don't even have a space, so something simple as that. And I think also with the marae, it comes with a lot of restrictions. And a cost as well for whānau. There's a cost also for whānau. Like the marae definitely has its purpose, but I think with the purpose of Te Pihinga, that's not the space that's not something that's for a marae. Like marae has its own purpose. Sports club has its own purpose, for example, rugby for the Maraenui teams, but not everybody plays rugby. And so it's, you know, I feel like those two spaces are kind of set for purpose. Yeah. Whereas Te Pihinga has other purposes as well.
Any further questions? Thank you both so much for your time today.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. We will take a brief 5-minute break. We are running a little bit behind time, sorry, so we can't have a longer time than that. And so what's the time now? If we could be back at 10 to 11, please.